Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. My name is Wenlin. If it's the first time we're meeting, I am a yoga and mindfulness instructor and yoga educator based in Turin, Italy. And today I'll be sharing with you some tips on 5 steps to your unique teaching style. So if you're tuning in live, drop a message so I know that you guys are there. And this will be an interactive session in which I'll be able to answer if you have any questions. So feel free to let me know if you do have them. Hi Tisha, hello. Morning. So, alright. So last weekend, what we did is we shared a little bit about the 7+1 different areas of what makes a good teacher, and the nice formula, a nice way of remembering it is P equals to add volts, and there are various different aspects of what I call a good teaching, or a higher level of great teaching compared to being just a certified teacher. So today I thought, since many of you in the survey, what you mentioned was that you actually like more guidance on actually how to carve your unique teaching style, because nowadays there are many yoga teachers all around, and it's not difficult to find a certified yoga teacher. So it's becoming more and more important to be differentiated, to have your own unique teaching style and your own unique teaching voice. So what I mean by this is to be able to convey or to guide whoever is on the journey with you in a very unique way that they may have never done before. And there are various different styles. So for example, a teacher could be more precise. So for example, Mr. BKS Iyengar, hi Rebecca. Mr. BKS Iyengar, for example, is an example of a style that is very precise, very focused on alignment, very specific, very meticulous. Right, and that is his approach and what has left of his lineage as what it continues to pass on now as a style of yoga. On the other hand, we have Ashtanga yoga as well, which is a lot about rigor, about discipline, about orderliness, about forming a kind of routine and following the steps in a very step-by-step kind of way. And then we have various different styles of yoga as well. Maybe you guys are familiar with Anusara yoga or might have heard of it. This was created by a yoga teacher called John Friend, who later on had a scandal. But if we ignore John Friend and his personal story, what happens is that Anusara yoga as a branch of yoga actually grew and cultivated many other great yoga teachers who have now come and created their own styles of yoga. So they've influenced, the style of yoga has actually influenced many great teachers now, including Sienna Sherman, including, I think, what's her name? Amy Ippoliti, as well as, I can't remember, it slipped my mind. So there are actually many teachers who studied with John Friend, who created Anusara Yoga. So, and Anusara Yoga has actually its foundations rooted in Hatha Yoga. And one of my primary teachers himself, Bo, who I actually wanted to invite to be interviewed, he practices primarily and teaches primarily Anusara Yoga, which is a kind of a heart-centric Hatha, flowing Hatha practice. Okay, so enough about introduction. I wanted to understand from you guys, for your point of view, what are the key areas that you find the most difficult when it comes to approaching a unique teaching style? Just top of mind, what are you struggling with the most at the moment? Just having a look at your comments. Okay, so no worries, keep the comments going. I think there's still a little bit of a lag between your commenting and me being able to see them. So maybe I can begin. So today, in terms of the structure for the 5 steps to your unique teaching style, rather than a formula, it's more like an approach and a couple of guidelines, and some tips from my own experience. Because for both of you and whoever else might be tuning in, who is not familiar with the style that I teach now, I primarily teach a style of yoga that I just call fusion flow. Right? It's not really a signature style. It's just a style that I found actually works best for me, and it's integrated. No worries about that, Rebecca. It's just integrated various elements of what I found resonated deeply with me, and that actually surfaced in my own practice. Right. So the question was actually, if someone asked you, right, with regards to your teaching style, right, and you wanted to create your own unique teaching style, what do you find the most difficult? Like, how do you begin to approach this? So that was the question. And feel free to keep the comments going, so I'll just keep going. With regards to my teaching style, and a lot of the time what happens is you pick and choose the elements that resonate the best with you, and then from then on you start to kind of experiment. Correct. Yeah, Tisha, you mentioned you're worried about getting in trouble with the Vinyasa certification if you add in things that aren't in their curriculum. Definitely, I agree. So if you are watching this and right now you're taking your yoga teacher training, I would recommend that this is something for you to look at and then consider at a later point once you've finished your yoga teacher training certification exam. So at this point of time, probably it's more important, if you still haven't gotten your certification, to follow the curriculum of whatever your school has given you, because they will have certain standards or certain guidelines in which they check and they say, oh, did she manage to describe the alignment for this particular pose properly? Did she manage to carve out a flow according to what we've recommended or what we've suggested? Yeah. Correct. Yes, exactly. So most schools, for example, they have a fixed style. So depending on which school that you registered your 200 hour or your 300 hour or even your 500 hour with, it would be either Hatha, Vinyasa, Ashtanga, Hatha Vinyasa, Hatha Ashtanga, or even Yin. So that's the style of yoga. And also there's, for example, Iyengar. And I want to talk a little bit about the differences between style and the approach. Because of course you can add in different things. Like for example, when I teach, I also include things from somatics, from Qigong, but this comes with lots of years of experience. What I teach primarily is still a Vinyasa style class. So that's the fundamental style or approach to teaching. The poses still flow fluidly from one to the other. I wouldn't spend more than 7 breaths in each pose, right? And if you do so, then that becomes more like a Hatha style class. And also it's more active, it's more yang. So definitely it's a flowing style class rather than a yin class. With regards to style versus approach, a style of yoga would be, I think, more like a branch of yoga. And many styles of yoga right now that are currently so-called available in the market, they all stem from the Hatha, like a main trunk of yoga. And then they happen to grow and to develop. So with regards to Ashtanga, it came from, of course, BKS. So it became from Mr. Ashtanga himself. And then with regards to Iyengar, it's from Mr. BKS Iyengar. We also know there's Bikram Yoga, who was created by the Yogi Bikram. But in my opinion, actually, all these styles, right, they different to the way they teach, there are also certain characteristics about them, as what I mentioned in the earlier part of the video. And this is what might be useful for you if after your certification, then you're beginning to think, okay, now that I have the fundamentals already in place, I already know how to describe all the alignments or what people should feel in a pose. I already know how to string roughly a sequence of poses into a lesson plan. Okay, now how do I begin to add in my own flavor into it? It's kind of like the school gives you a recipe, right? And it tells you, okay, you need to put this ingredient, this into this so that you can form, let's say, fish soup, right? And that might be the dish. After you graduate from cooking school, what happens is you then begin to experiment with your own way of cooking the soup. The ingredients might roughly be the same, right? But how long you cook it, how you prepare the ingredient, and how you serve it to maybe your guests will be different. And that is what makes you as a chef shine. So all the chefs, right, the chef trainees who came from the same school, as they graduate, you have to start to carve your niche in your own style of cooking. And that's what I mean by finding your unique style. So the dish could be the same. You could be serving an Ashtanga class. You could be serving a Vinyasa class. You could be serving a Yin class. But you have your own unique spin to it because of the way you present it. And that's what I mean by unique style of teaching or unique approach to teaching. Okay, so let's have a look at the 5 steps or the 5 tips with regards to how you can begin to consider this. So really valid points that you guys have mentioned. So if you're still doing your yoga teacher training at this moment, just shelve this episode and come back to it again after you do your finish your certification. No worries about that. And then, you know, this might provide you more food for thought. And even right now, actually, what it might be good for you is, as someone who is undergoing this training, if you have teachers that you often practice with, you know, if you do practice teaching, it might be interesting to observe and notice how other chefs or chef trainees are doing it. Because even if they provide the same formula, right, or the same ingredients, right, the way you kind of like cut the ingredients, maybe they say dice the fish into cubes. Right, some people dice the cubes a little bit bigger. Some people dice them into, like, rather than cubes, like more like long kinds of slices. And some people, maybe they shred them instead. So the same with alignment, or the same with maybe say orientating students to a class. Usually the school will give you guidelines, but there's always some room to play around, right? Not necessarily with the overall reaching style, but within the confines of the style itself, Hatha, Vinyasa, Ashtanga, there is actually a lot of room to play. So going back to my point, if you're practicing with a teacher, if you're watching videos of teachers who are teaching you, or if you're doing practice teaching with another role model, observe and think, okay, what characteristics or, you know, attributes does this teacher have, or what kind of feeling is this teacher giving me? Is she very meticulous? Does she take a lot of time to describe specific things? Or is she more focused on the general feel, on making things smooth, on keeping the students present in the moment, right? There are many different areas that we can look at. Okay, so I digressed a little bit. So let's go back to the topic from today, but keep your comments coming. And the first step I wanted to share with you, and probably it's nothing new, is the first step itself is Satya. And Satya is, of course, one of the different, within one of the limbs of yoga. And Satya actually means truth or authenticity. And so it's teaching as you, teaching as what you know from what you have and what you're confident with. So very often as beginner yoga teachers, right, you might feel pressurized to have to teach certain poses that you are not comfortable with. I would recommend that if you are doing, maybe say even your certification exam, if there are some poses, for example, like headstand, for example, even like plow pose, unless the school has made it a requirement for you to necessarily teach the pose, if you don't feel comfortable and you don't feel prepared, and even in your own practice, you feel you cannot embody what is required to do the pose, then you can omit that and instead focus on what you know. There's already a lot of content with regards to what you know and what you can share. And instead, if you focus on those areas, this will really allow you to have that kind of confidence and clarity so that you can bring your own twist and your own flavor to it. Some other things, so there's, even if you stay within the same style, for example, let's say you teach a Vinyasa style class or a Hatha style class, which is like you stay, the poses are more stagnant, like one pose and then there's a pause, you stay for 5 to 7 breaths and then you transition to another pose without the flowing element, right? You can still incorporate elements of, for example, bhavana, which is like a theme, like the general feeling or like a moral or theme of the story into it. And this could be uniquely yours. So for me, many of you guys are familiar that mine is called Qigong Fusion Flow, and I like to integrate elements of Eastern philosophy because I'm ethnic Chinese, and I find that many people may not be able to encounter or to gain knowledge in this area, and I would like to take this knowledge which is close to me as a person in my culture, in my identity, and share it with others so that they can enjoy it, even if they are not Chinese, even if they cannot read, Chinese language, or they've never encountered this text or this kind of philosophy. So for you, it doesn't have to be like a specific kind of thing. It could be just things you enjoy. For example, do you enjoy poetry? If you do, who are your favorite poets? What kind of poetry do you enjoy? You could use that to thread or like to tie everything together instead of necessarily fixating on like yoga philosophy, instead of like tying it to the yamas and niyamas. It doesn't necessarily have to be these things. We can find inspiration and we can find authenticity in like the things we enjoy and the things that resonate with us everywhere, like from life, from maybe if you like running, you can use the metaphor of a marathon, or you can use the physical experiences you have had as a runner to share that with others through the journey of yoga as well. All right. And also the other thing would be to consider, you guys have both applied for and will be likely in the courage and clarity workshop I wanted to share with you is that you can start thinking about what your strengths are. So in your other line of work, or from your life as you were growing up, right? What were the key strengths that you had? Are you particularly meticulous? Are you very caring? Are you warm? Do you have a great voice? So these are all things that you can think about, that you can use to enhance the way you teach, or make that like the selling point or your unique, we call USP, unique selling point, right, inside your class, so that it makes you special, and like other teachers or or other schools won't necessarily have that. Okay, so I'm just reading your comments. Rebecca, you said the style you're interested in is a class with present moment focus. Beautiful. Breath focus, tying into philosophy, taking time to feel alignment, how the body feels, noting what the mind is doing. Beautiful. And focusing on building awareness, right? Exactly. Poem or short reading, even at the start of Shavasana, you don't even need to begin with that poetry, because in the beginning, maybe some people, they feel like they want to move, and you like playfulness, and so you can inject humor into your classes. So there are many different styles. Some teachers are very strict. They are like, okay, yoga is very serious, it's very spiritual. Other teachers are very playful and fun. Like my favorite teacher, and who really deeply influenced my style, Bo, he was the one who shared with me that you can playfully lift your right leg up towards the sky. You can rainbow your hips. You can melt your shoulders. You can brighten and shine your heart. So there are many ways of like cueing or describing the same alignment, and you can experiment with how you want to describe it, how you want to convey this. And this is all kind of tied to Satya, which is coming from a place of authenticity. All right, let's move on to the second point. Just keep your comments coming, and I'll like have a look at that. The second one is Setya, which is actually non-stealing. Right, we say in yoga to be content with what you have and not to steal what doesn't belong to yours. Okay, I want to take a spin to it. Right, instead of not stealing, today I invite you to think that everything right in the world is actually stolen. Okay, there's nothing really in the world that is truly original. Everyone who created something or founded something actually got inspiration from somewhere else or someone else. Necessarily when you begin teaching, or even if you have already, if you're tuning in and you're already a certified teacher, likely your own style will have elements of all the teachers that you have studied with that you respect, that you honor, that you feel influenced by, and that's okay. That's totally fine. It's very common in the beginning to feel like, I'm just parroting my favorite teacher. I'm just saying exactly the same thing. That's okay. In the beginning, that's how you begin to put together your own style. And I have one additional tip here. So you can steal from others, but what makes it different from someone who's a thief versus someone who's an innovator is if you steal that thing and then you take a new spin to it and you make it uniquely yours. Because us humans, I don't know about you, but for me, right, no matter how hard I try to replicate something exactly the same, I would never be able to do it. I always fail miserably at trying to do, exactly the same thing as what someone else did. And then in the end, it kind of looks slightly different, but has my own take to it. And that's okay, because then you've taken, whatever inspiration that was and made it yours. And then over time, as you continue to practice teaching, continue to approach various different students and observe your own teaching, refining it using the feedback loops that we mentioned in the webinar, you will be able to carve your own unique style, right? And then with regards to this, I wanted to share another tip, which is the best way, in my opinion, to be able to steal well is to steal from a lot of people. So Austin Kleon, who wrote the book Steal Like an Artist, one of his tips is you go and steal from a lot of people. Because if you steal only from one person, it's super obvious that, it's all from that teacher and he or she has a unique style, unique way of teaching. But if you reference and learn from lots of different people, you can pick and choose, right? And I think that it is helpful to have the mentality that there is always something to be learned from someone else. So you may attend a class that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, but if you have that approach or the mindset that, what did I learn from this, from this teacher? What did she do well that I don't necessarily have the skills to, that perhaps I could, learn from, or maybe that I could reflect and then integrate into my own style. So that's one other tip. Coming back to this point, so steal from lots of different teachers, lots of people you enjoy, even steal from your peers, right? If you do practice teaching one-on-one with other trainees, or if you're a certified teacher already and you see other teachers around offering free classes and you're watching their videos, take a moment to think, okay, what can I learn from this style? Or was that transition very interesting? I would not have thought of doing that transition from this pose to this pose, and I've never done that before. So that's kind of like stealing. But then, again, no, it's not really stealing. It's just taking what's good from what others have and then integrating it and putting it all together. All right, Tisha, you are saying that, great tip and thank you for the permission, and you listened to me with Kiss. You started to mimic your favorite teachers, combine their styles. Exactly, and you substitute your own music, your own theme, and your own playful style, and then that makes it you really. It's not your teacher's style, because music again is also very, very subjective and it's very personal. When you have that changes the tone and the style of the class, and it makes it uniquely you. Right? And you mentioned, this approach helped you to calm down, with what you were doing in class. I'm really glad to hear that. Always keep it simple, and you can, whenever something gets too overwhelming, like the project is too big or the idea of whatever you have to accomplish is too big, just take a moment, calm down, and then start to think, okay, what are the possible components of this thing that I'm trying to approach, and what is the first smallest bit that I can look at? And then you start to piece things together, and over time you can add on and then make it a little bit more complex. All right, let's move on to the next point. So we had Satya, which is staying true to yourself, teaching from a place of authenticity, teaching from your strengths, playing your strengths, using them as your advantages and your unique teaching style or unique teaching voice. The second was Satya, which is non-stealing, and in this case is actually steal from lots of people and then make it yours. The third point here was tapas. All right, and we know, probably you're familiar with tapas. So tapas is austerity, and it is a kind of discipline. It is just showing up every day, showing up all the time. Even on the days where you don't feel like teaching, when you feel like, I have nothing to share, my cup is empty, it's showing up and just doing the work, and maybe that day somehow something comes up. All right, so I wanted to share a quote with you from American comedian Dan Harmon, and he said, right, good writers hate bad writing, but hating bad writing doesn't make you good. Writing badly does. And the same with teaching yoga. So in the beginning, you might wince when you teach, and it's like, it just feels so bad. Just like also for a while, I was doing illustration work part-time, and when I began, I just felt like it was just not good. The work is not good. Maybe it's okay by some other people's standards, but by my own standards, I was like cringing every time I had to like submit something, even if the client was happy with my work. But it's only by going through tons and tons and tons of this kind of repetition that you actually get to the point where your work starts to become good, and the same applies to teaching. Right, okay, I'm just reading your comments. Rebecca, you mentioned this past week you started taking notes when you take a class, right? Beautiful, to note down things like phrasing, sequencing, cues. This is a great one as well, and I think, yeah, anyone who's tuning in, if you have the luxury, of course, of being able to watch a class at home, then have a book. Eric Schiffman, who is one of the greatest yoga teachers around, and he has coached and inspired lots of great teachers. He says in his Freedom Yoga teacher training manual that he actually recommends, even if you're doing your own practice, to have a journal or a piece of paper and like a pen close to you, so that while you are moving, whether it is your own practice or whether you are watching the practice of someone else and you're following that practice, if inspiration hits you and something like really deeply resonates with you in that moment, you have that spark, just take a pause and then write that down, because we won't remember. Afterwards, you might think, it's okay, I can hold it in my mind, I need to stay here. You won't, at least for me, I won't. I'm not sure about you guys. It's good to actually have that hard copy, and then at the end of whatever you were doing, you can review it and then think back to that moment and, okay, yes, this was what I felt and this is what was truly inspiring to me, and how can I use this or incorporate this in my own classes, right? Okay, so let's move on to the fourth point. So we're at the fourth step now. So begin by teaching from who you are, with your strengths, playing your strengths to your advantage. And then as you do this, steal from other people, all the people that inspire you, all the things that inspire you, and then integrate them with lots of practice, just taking time, practicing, teaching anyone. So especially if you're a beginning yoga teacher, the more you teach, the better you get at teaching. And also I mentioned this in the webinar, you don't just teach. What's super important is after you teach, you have this feedback loop in which you sit down and then you reflect on whether the class went well, what went well, what things you liked, you didn't like, how you were responding at the moment, whether you made any so-called slips, like, you didn't manage to respond, or the class didn't go as how you originally planned. Why? And was that necessarily a problem? And then also how the students responded. And if you're doing a recording of your own video, then you can watch yourself or listen to yourself giving the cues and stuff like that. So that's super important. And now let's move on to the fourth point. The fourth point also takes inspiration from the yoga philosophies and the 8 limbs. This one is aparigaha, right? And aparigaha, actually here, what I mean here is to step beyond your comfort zone, right? And lots of people associate this from the niyamas or the yamas with the sense of like non-grasping, or like not clinging on to what is not necessarily yours. But here, what I mean is, if you're still new to teaching, right, your first teaching opportunities, you can approach them more as like experiments, so that they won't necessarily become limiting factors. They won't necessarily become like trials in which when you do them, you feel like, if it didn't go as well as you hoped, you have failed. So that's kind of a mindset switch. And if you have that mindset change and you're able to see every opportunity as a chance to experiment, then it can be something fun to do, and it can be exciting. And you can approach each opportunity with a curious mind, because when you're curious and you're using the right side of the brain, you can come up with more creative things. You can be able to be innovative and be able to come up with new ideas that you might not have from your own like usual kind of stereotypical behaviors, from your fixed mindset, right? And then the last step, right, after you've done all of this, is to come back to ahimsa, right? So probably you guys are already familiar with ahimsa. Ahimsa is first of the yamas and the niyamas, and it is, in my opinion, the most important. And I talk about it all the time because I just find it is so hard to embody. It is very, very important. If you can hold yourself with compassion as you continue to begin to refine your voice, refine your style, then that is the kind of benevolence that you can hold for yourself, not just as a person, but also as a teacher for others. And this changes the way you hold space, that changes the way you approach things. It also changes the way you interact and observe your students, right? Let me see. Right, Rebecca, you mentioned that experimenting approach was what you tried to bring to the student clinic when you were in massage school. That's perfect. Exactly. I think even for me, for example, having taught yoga or guided people through yoga for 5 years, this is something that I find really difficult. Coming back to the sense that, okay, I'm just experimenting. Maybe today we try something new, and maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't. And that's okay. It's always opportunity to collect new information that so that then you can refine. If you have that kind of researcher's mind, okay, I'm like doing this experiment or this trial to see what will the outcome will be. I have a hypothesis of how it might turn out, but who knows? So many things are out of my control, right? I cannot control. I only have certain variables that are within my control. It's just like also, going back to the metaphor of cooking. If you've added a new ingredient to, let's say, your recipe, right? And it's the first time you're doing this, or maybe you're baking something for the first time and you've never done it before, it's never going to be perfect. Unless, for example, you're a super talented baker or you were very, very lucky. Usually there will be some changes or some differences that are just outside of what you could originally anticipate. But that is information for you to integrate into your feedback loop so that the next time will be better. And my husband Luca, he always says, if you think short run, right, this is where the problem is, because for you, here and now is like the final outcome and it's make or break, right? And then it becomes very critical and you become very harsh on yourself, and then you lose that opportunity to grow. Instead, if you take the long run mentality and you think, this is a marathon, I have the entire of my life to experiment, to refine, to become a great teacher, then you are never like making mistakes, because every so-called mistake is an opportunity to learn. All right, so keep the comments coming. I just want to do a quick recap because I've seen that we are a little bit behind. So the first point once again was Satya. Teach from what you have, who you are, where you are now, with the tools, with the strengths that you have, and what inspires you. Second one is Asetya. Steal from many different people. Like the more the better, those people who inspire you, and then make it yours. Right? The third one is Tapas. Show up every day, just keep teaching, and as you teach, integrate, refine, reflect, and then you'll get better. Aparigaha, sometimes you have to take certain risks, right? Step outside of your comfort zone, do things that make you feel uncomfortable, try something new. Only by doing that, then you will reach that place of magic and find something unique. And the last one is Ahimsa, holding yourself with compassion and teaching from a place of knowing that you are human and we're all living. Michelle has this saying of like how, you know, we are just divine beings having human experiences. I think that's super beautiful, and it's a great and timely reminder for me, for you, for everyone, right? Okay, so I'm just reading Rebecca's comments here. It says, yeah, it's good modeling for the class to take chances in life, definitely. You know, the freedom of trying something new and how you deal with it when things don't go as expected. Yeah, and you mentioned you love teachers who model philosophy with their actions and their methods of teaching. Yeah, I think most students, they really love it when teachers show like the human side of them. Because, you know, sometimes you might feel that, this teacher, she's like a guru, you know, someone who's like godlike, and I don't have this idea of actually what she is like in person. Is she always so perfect? Is she always so calm? No, that's not the case. There are many sides to us, and if we can show a human side of us to our students, then it also shows our students that they can hold themselves with compassion as well, right? And it is, I think, very forgiving, very kind, and being very generous to them and ourselves, right? Feel free to let me know if you have any other questions. Yeah, Tisha, you're welcome. Yeah, these steps, I think rather than steps, they're more like guidelines, and they don't necessarily flow like chronologically either, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've just called them steps because, you know, people like the idea of like, okay, it's step 1, step 2, step 3, and then it's kind of like a journey that you go on. But they're more of like things to take note of and to remember whenever you are going through something difficult or you're struggling with something. Yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you so much for tuning in, ladies. Yeah, I hope you have a great day. And feel free to let me know if you have any further questions later on today. Yeah. All right. Thank you.